Hey, Wednesday. This pants is at you, on you, in you.
Oh, no, no,
No,
no, not in you.
it's within.
I'm not sure that's much better.
This is Business Pants. That's Matt Moscardi. I am Damian Rawls. We are Free Float Media. This is the daily business news roundup. Right, Matt?
It is, but today it's ESG Wednesday, right? So
Yeah, but you promised to get rid of that acronym and change it. Environmental, social, and governance. That's what ESG stands for. Even those three terms are murky. But
yeah, I kind of hate everything about them.
uh, yeah,
But that's okay. We live in the world we live in. I have to communicate to people, and ESG seems to be communicating. Eventually, we're going to replace it entirely with something else. But today, we could be called "Kill the Acronym Wednesday." We could go with that. Is that a thing?
well, we're called inside the pants, so that's
Yeah, we can't get
let's stick
inside the
with that.
pants. So why don't you?
The problem is, yeah.
What is inside our pants today? Let's do the agenda and then let's chat.
Okay, fine. I'll get off my medium horse. All right. The agenda. We are all about everything today. Everything ESG. We're going to do some headlines, and then really we're going to hit the big story of the week, and probably I'm going to guess the big story of the year. It may be is an annual letter from Blackrock CEO Larry Fink.
You just like saying his name.
I do. I love Fink. So, and then Matt's going to make something. But that's today. We're going to go really into depth into that letter.
Yeah, it's going to be deep. In fact, what I'm going to make is something out of that letter. So, no sense in delaying the inevitable. Well, we're going to do headlines first, right? So I'll harp you in because we still don't have a other sound. I got no feedback from last episode. No one told me that they don't like the harp.
That means they like it.
Right.
It means they like everything. All right.
Inside my pants.
Not your pants. It's the pants. It's like we talk about the industry. It's a metaphor. It's not literal.
I should also say I'm sorry we're late today, fan.
Figurative.
Person, because
right.
I have 3 children who all needed doctors and dentist appointment like back to back. Basically, I'm a mess, is what I'm saying.
Well, and the good news is that in the half hour time that I had to kill, I noticed that my cat threw up on my windowsill. So, if not for that delay, I might not have seen it until the spring. So thank you.
It's small victories.
All right. First, let's look at some ESG news from around the world. Again, ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance.
Oh man, governments.
Governance being essentially the way companies run themselves, right? All right. Well, starting with a story that you wanted to cover, away luggage.
So disdainfully.
I don't know. I just want to hear what your take is. Away, because I don't even know anything about this company, and I looked them up. And when I look things up, it means that I Google image search them. That's how I look up stuff.
So professional.
Away luggage co-founder Steph Corey is back at the helm of the company in a co-CEO role because, I guess it's hard to pick one leader. And she's sharing that role with former Lululemon COO Stuart Haselden. So if you remember, Matt, Corey stepped down last month after a pretty crazy Verge article that came out that revealed some of her scary leadership tactics. So she's back at the job. And of course, now the company is disputing the reporting. So I don't know why now. I don't know what happened. Maybe she just decided to go home for the holidays. What? I don't know, really. Like, why are they all of a sudden disputing the reporting? What's going on here?
Like this feels very simple to me.
Yeah.
Jeff Bezos is a notorious asshole, and I don't know Jeff Bezos.
That's true. I didn't even know that.
Maybe he's super nice.
Okay.
But I heard he can be. Or there are reports about how he makes work very difficult. His employees strike routinely because of the working conditions, and
Hmm.
we laud him as a genius. And
You do.
I wait, what?
Who's
Uh,
we?
and and then when I see a story come out of Verge about how a female CEO is cold and indifferent to her employees, she's like immediately shit canned. She's immediately fired.
Well, well, you
And they
wondered.
brought in
Yeah,
they bring
yeah,
in a guy who worked at Lululemon, which basically had Me Too problems
yeah. They
that
did. Yeah,
couldn't be contained at
yeah,
Lululemon.
yeah.
So I mean, now that she's back, I tweeted at her because why
Hmm.
not? That next time she just needs to look up dual class shares. That's all she needs. She's got to be like every other tech bro, even though it's a luggage company, dual class herself, and you're untouchable. That's the way it's got to
Right.
work.
Become a dictator. That's your solution.
That's my
Is it
solution.
is Away even a publicly traded company? I don't even know.
No, they're not. But it's an
Oh,
interesting story because of the this what it was to me is one sort of data point in a broad campaign of data points to show the standards that women have to be held to
yeah,
be elected to a board, to be a CEO, to maintain their role as a leader is significantly higher than any male counterpart.
yeah. And beyond that, I bet part of the reason why she left in the first place is because she probably wanted to do the right thing in the eyes of her employees, unlike what a man would ever do. Right? I
What a
mean,
man, what a man, what a man.
just guessing there. All right, next story. And these type of stories sound like I'd have the record on repeat because I guess I do. But ocean warming is speeding up. In 25 years, this is weird. I mean, you're gonna have to help me through this kind of data, this kind of stat, but I like it. In 25 years, the oceans have absorbed heat equivalent to the energy of 3.6 billion Hiroshima-sized atom bomb explosions. I mean, that's I mean, I look. I applaud the craftiness of scaring people in this way. I can't quite grasp what that means.
Well, let me.
I guess I guess it
Yeah.
means there's a lot. It probably means there's a lot of friggin' water because that's right.
I think we should caveat this entire discussion by saying we are not scientists. In
No,
fact, even having to say that, I think somewhere my wife just chortled out her soup because the idea
well,
of me being a scientist is that laughable.
I will tell you this though, Matt's wife, that I my I almost went to the University of Chicago. It was my number one
That's
choice.
it. That's what you have to tell her.
Yeah,
Is
so
that just
that I was
bragging?
close.
Are
I
you,
was close to
are you,
scientist, right? Like that was my moment. But of course, I stupidly picked a different college. But that was my moment.
uh, I think what this is really about
Yeah,
is because so much ice has been lost, the ice reflects the sun, and we've absorbed that much more heat into the ocean. Now, the ocean
is
is
this
so
like yeah,
vast that it's not like you step in
conspiracy
it and it's
theory?
boiling.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that's the idea, right? That's like the science behind it. It's heat absorbed due to smaller ice sheets and the effects of climate change.
Well, let me answer a question that the audience is asking. Why should we care about rapidly warming ocean water? I'll answer that. Because the measurement of ocean heat content is considered one of the most effective ways to show how fast Earth is warming because more than 90% of the heat trapped by greenhouse gases goes into the oceans. So take that to your dinner party, Princeton grads.
There aren't a lot of dinner parties where that comes up. But
Uh,
if you are
yeah,
an investor, the thing that's nerve wracking about that is the majority of the world's assets, particularly real estate assets, but assets in general, valuable assets, are on coastlines where now you're effectively going swimming in 3.7 billion Hiroshima bombs. That's how you should think about it.
uh,
You should
all right,
be
well,
honestly. You should be petrified if you have any physical assets anywhere near a coastline. You should be petrified. The next 10 years is not great for your portfolio.
and we'll get into that soon. We're going to talk a lot about assets, so let's move
Are
on.
we? That sounds terrible. Go ahead.
Yeah. This one's for all you inbred nomination committees on boards.
Ooh.
Listen up. Companies, especially recent IPOs, are facing insurance premium rate hikes for director and officers insurance, driven by a spike in securities action lawsuits. The rate of suits filed against companies has soared an estimated of 150% over the last decade. Now, I don't know if this is a significant increase, but I just wanted to call out inbred nomination committees to just like think about your board construction, and when we talk about BlackRock and Mr. Fink, just think about your board construction. It's not enough to have your buddies hanging around. Okay, that's it. I just wanted to have that moment on my soapbox.
Well, it is interesting to bring that up now, considering BlackRock's letter, which we'll get to, targets boards a little bit, right? So
That's it.
let's come
All
back
right,
to this. Yeah, let's come
yeah.
back to
All
it.
right. Finally, according to the World Economic Forum's latest global risks report, for the first time in the survey's 10-year outlook, the top 5 global risks, no surprise, are all environmental. In terms of the severity of impact over the next 10 years, the top risk was deemed to be the failure of climate change mitigation and adaptation. And that brings us to a perfect segue to our big story of the day here.
Yeah, should we harp in the big story, or should we?
Yeah, let's just get at it.
Let's just get
Yeah.
at it. All right. So BlackRock, Larry Fink, wrote a letter.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining.
First of all, I thought I kept typing BlackRock and Larry Fink and BlackRock, and I thought, should we just call it Black Fink? But then I thought better of that. It didn't smell right, so I'm going to go with Fink Rock. Okay.
But they're not dual class. Like, they're a publicly traded company. Larry's not a dictator.
Well, I noticed that I think it's PNC owns over 20% of BlackRock, so they have a significant voting power there.
Good for
but anyway.
PNC. Okay.
So
yes.
yeah, do you want to
go through the highlights of this letter? What are the highlights?
So
top line it.
And in his annual letter to CEOs, BlackRock CEO Larry Fink is warning that the financial risks of climate change are bigger than any crisis he's experienced in his career on Wall Street. He said climate change has become a defining factor in companies' long-term prospects. I believe we are on the edge of a fundamental reshaping of finance. I believe we are just beginning a major reallocation of capital. He said that companies must act or face anger from investors. He also said that the decision was strictly business. Politics is not a part of this. I don't know why politics and business have to be separated there, but so as a result, BlackRock, the world's largest money manager with just over $7.4 trillion in assets under manager, said that it will roll out a number of new product offerings that focus on sustainable investing, including portfolio construction to launching new investment products that screen fossil fuels. They also said that they would be increasingly disposed to cast critical proxy votes tied to sustainability, and they pledged that the company's actively managed funds would divest from any company that makes more than 25% of its revenue from thermal coal, blah, 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 blah. I'm going to pause there and let you, I know you're probably dying to say some things.
Well, no, I mean, like, the beginning is, do you think he's wrong? I mean, he's effectively laying out the case that climate change is going to fuck up your portfolio, right? Like, that's basically all he's saying.
I don't think he's wrong, but I mean, of course he's not wrong. But I should remind you. You probably remember this, but I'll tell the audience that just 2 years ago, Think Rock also sent out a strongly worded letter about how companies needed to make society better, and that companies need to do more than make profits. They need to contribute to society, right? So, and that probably led eventually to the Business Roundtable also staking its flag into the stakeholder game. So the question's right back at you, Matt. Like, is this just him kind of keeping up with the cool hip times, or is there like, is this meaningful? I mean, it's one thing to just say it.
Well, I just for context sake, before we even dive into it, the number that needs to stick in everyone's mind is 7.4 trillion assets under management.
And before we get too far, for someone like me, like I don't have, there's no context to me to that number. Like, do you have a sense of the percentage that number represents? Like what is that?
I looked it up once upon a time. The
Yeah.
fact is, BlackRock is by far the largest
Okay.
manager of money in the world.
So the
Like,
most okay. So what it says is important, but what about what it does? That's what concerns me here. Like
that's
it's
the other thing.
saying it's saying good things, but first of all, is it going to back up what it's saying? Is it going to is it going to turn its rhetoric into action? And then beyond that, who is going to keep tabs on them? We worked at MSCI ESG Research, probably the biggest provider of ESG research in the world. We didn't really do things like that, right? We didn't really keep tabs on the many, many, many promises of entities like BlackRock, but maybe we should.
Well. First of all,
Yeah,
that and I due respect to my ex colleagues at MSCI, they are heavily conflicted when it comes to something like BlackRock because, I mean,
second biggest owner of MSCI.
I mean, BlackRock not only owns MSCI, but is one of the biggest clients of companies like MSCI, right? Like the MSCIs of the world, they're vying for BlackRock dollars. Like when the Vanguard was a big client of MSCI and left. I think that was 4 or 5 years ago. They left MSCI and the stock price cratered that day because Vanguard was so big. So there's this weird ecosystem of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
providers and the ESG people rely on these people holding them to account. It might actually not be great for business. This is where you come to Business Pants and Free Float Media because we don't have any conflicts. We have no
Yeah,
clients. We don't care
we're free
about
to
any
complain
of
about it,
y'all.
whine about it. Yeah, we're the Greta Thunberg of what?
Of business podcasts.
ESG news, yeah,
So here's,
financial news.
but the important thing
That's
is the
yeah.
BlackRock's massive, like massively
Here's how
massive.
here's how massive they are. Here's how far their tentacles reach. You want to know who the largest outside shareholder in Saudi Aramco is?
Exactly.
It's BlackRock.
And this is where it feels disingenuous because I do think you're right about, this is Larry Fink writes a letter every year to CEOs pleading them to do some such, and saying BlackRock's going to do some stuff. And this year he's writing this letter that largely targets climate, but also kind of dabbles in other ESG things, like talking about how it's unsustainable for a bank to sell its products badly, or for, I think he said diversity in the letter somewhere. It was either diversity or some other social thing. He uses an example of an E, an S, and a G: environmental issue, a social issue, and a governance issue. But the fact is, in April, when Aramco was dialing back last April their IPO, Larry Fink was the one out there saying this is a disappointment, right? Like he was
Yeah, of
disappointed.
course.
And
Yeah.
Aramco is there a bigger provider of climate change than Aramco, hypothetically?
Well, not only that, but why don't you just take the S in ESG, social? I mean, there are a lot of question marks about the Saudi Arabian regime that controls Saudi Aramco, right?
So this is where Larry Fink is in a position where he has to be all things to all people because BlackRock is beta. Okay. Beta is this concept of how the market, right? The whole market is basically beta, and the market moves in directions. And a lot of investors actually look at their portfolio and say, how much am I moving relative to the rest of the market? That's like, what's the beta and what's my beta? That means I move less than the market or more than the market. Larry Fink and BlackRock is essentially beta. The $7 trillion in assets is the largest single asset manager alongside Vanguard and Fidelity and State Street. There's basically 4 companies that run everything when it comes to assets under management. And they are the market. So Larry can't go out and say, Aramco, you suck. We don't want to buy you because you're environmentally unfriendly. Because it's anathema to his business. He's got clients who want to buy Aramco. He has to offer them Aramco. So
let me interrupt for a second. We talk a lot about the populism movements that kind of have been sweeping across the Western world, and right now Trump's in power, so it's a right wing populist movement, and then we talk about the potential of someone like Warren or Sanders winning, representing the left side of that point of view. And we hear a lot about Elizabeth Warren targeting breaking up big entities like Facebook. But you mentioned that 4 companies control all these assets. Why is that not ever a target of the populist left, breaking up the amount of assets they control under management, and should it be?
Well, I mean, arguably even worse than that is the SEC is actively siding with massive institutional investors because the SEC's big proxy advisor push, which we don't have to get into details. Effectively, the SEC is trying to limit small players from filing proxies that they think are frivolous, like mostly environmental proxies, which BlackRock has a deep history of voting with management against any environmental initiatives. Most of those initiatives come from places like they're organized through places like Ceres or James McRitchie and CorpGov.net. Like there's these groups of people who have been working on proxies to change company culture, to find out more about what's going on with climate change. Even Amazon's own employees were voting their proxies against Amazon, but BlackRock routinely sides with management on those issues historically.
Yeah, and that's another thing that's important to pause on, because they're first of all, they didn't even mention the environment in last year's annual letter to CEOs, which strikes me as odd, right? I mean, this is not like this topic is new by any means, okay? I mean, second of all, this is part of the problem with this letter, is that they're promising to hold management and boards of directors more accountable for their voting, but they don't lay out how, right? I mean, that's part of the problem. I mean, they have to back this up with actual policy changes. They can't just.
No, it goes beyond policy. I mean, part of the problem, what he does say. So let me give you the good news of this letter first, right?
Okay.
And because there's a lot to like about it too. What it does represent is a crescendo of the idea that the environment and the investment community are effectively beginning to understand one another. As in,
so it's like ESG going mainstream. Is that what
I mean, like with
legitimized by the.
What it gives is cloud cover to any other investor out there who wants to say the environment is part of my fiduciary duty. When BlackRock CEO says it's part of BlackRock's fiduciary duty, it's really easy then, if you're a small manager, to go out and say we also agree, right? Because the largest players in the world are now doing it. So there is this sort of incredibly valuable crescendo around the idea that climate change will dramatically affect finance, and now everyone's sort of paying attention to that, which gets to your point of, okay, well, now what? The big thing missing in this letter to me, the big thing which he sort of starts down the path of, because he talks a lot about we're going to, I think the line is like, disclosure is it's like the means for achieving inclusive capitalism or something like that. He spends a lot of time talking about the idea of transparency and disclosure and what companies tell us and standards around disclosure for climate and things like that. That's all great. Wonderful. We need standards. I love it. But you're talking very specifically about a search for like an accounting standard so that you know what companies are doing. Doesn't that sort of punt on what we're going to do we don't know enough about what companies are doing to do anything without having ever told them what you want them to do, right? Like,
it's like Zuck constantly punting on regulations over his own industry.
So I think of it like this in historical context. The reason why you have GAAP in the U.S. and IFRS internationally everywhere else, like the metric system, we're the only morons who don't use it. The reason why you have accounting standards is because investors wanted to know how much a company made, and they couldn't trust what the companies told them. So they went out and they said, let's make a standard by which we can make comparisons between companies on how much they made and understand all the nuance of that. But they start with one premise. I want to know how much a company made. right? Earnings.
Mm-hmm.
What's the premise here for ESG, for sustainability? There's not one sustainability, because you can vote against a non-diverse board and say that's part of sustainability. You could vote because you don't like dual class. That's part of governance. It's G. It gets lumped into sustainability. Or you could vote because a company is the largest spewer of carbon in the entire world. All of those things get lumped in, but they're not solving the same thing. Sustainability is not a defined output, right? Like there
Yeah,
is no, like, you just wake me up when somebody like can hand me some sustainability. It's not a thing, right?
yeah, and I think when like the big boys like BlackRock and then Business Roundtable with the stakeholder discussion, and I'll add that Larry Fink is on one of the members of the Business Roundtable,
Mm-hmm.
but I think they're part of this discussion is probably going to make it a lot murkier. I think we're the
No, they
distance
just
between,
punted. It's not
but I'm saying
murky.
that, but I'm just saying when you add more players to this discussion, I think that all the hand wringing around trying to define these things, as you're trying to say, is just it's like having a board of like 100 members now. I mean, who is going to be in charge of defining these things? I don't
Well, that's the
understand.
thing. It's like, and no one actually wants to do it because there's too much risk to actually doing it. So the
But why?
positive,
Why wouldn't they want to be in the forefront? Why wouldn't a company like MSCI attempt it?
maybe they will, but remember, BlackRock is like a, if they're a investor in and or a client of the MSCI's of the world,
Sure.
then you run into a problem, right? Like MSCI can only give BlackRock so much cover, because here's what's
Yeah.
happening
Oh, okay.
from a real pragmatic standpoint. Say hypothetically we had any money and we wanted to go invest in a thing, right? And we invest in some fund that calls itself the sustainability fund. But we find out that Exxon is in the sustainability fund. Now, your gut response is, well, that doesn't make sense. They're like the largest provider of oil and gas in the entire world. Why would Exxon, like publicly traded, because Aramco is larger. But like, why would Exxon be in my portfolio of sustainability? But MSCI, we know this because we were there, but so does Sustainalytics, and so do a lot of these other ESG companies. They go out and they say, actually, you know what? Exxon is like one of the largest by absolute numbers investors in renewables or renewable, adjacent sort of industries and innovation. So do I exclude that from my portfolio, or do I include it? Is that too much nuance? Is that not enough nuance? MSCI can only provide so much cover to a BlackRock of the world. Effectively, BlackRock is the fiduciary, MSCI isn't. The fiduciaries have to decide what sustainability means, what it is, so that they can execute on that. In this
Right.
letter, Larry
Yeah.
Fink punts on that and says the companies need to tell us more. He says
Here's my
climate is the
yeah.
issue, but companies need to give us more. That's basically it.
Here's my sudden brainstorm.
Ooh.
Uh, so when big donors donate to like say universities, they can say, I wanted to go to the chemistry lab, and I want it go to buying new couches at the library, right? What if the future of equity of shares? What if companies started to split some of their shares so that you could invest? What if you could invest in the renewable part of Exxon only? What if that was like the flash forward 50 years ahead in time? What if
Well, you don't have to
investors
go
could get
50 years.
yeah?
I will
What
tell
if what
you.
if what if investors could get real specific with how they invested their capital?
I mean, they do this in fixed income. They ring fence for projects, right? That's what a green bond is. I will tell you, for real, I've seen proposals about green equity. Effectively, what you're talking about, ring fenced green equity. It could be a thing, but it's not a thing. It's not, if it's a thing that BlackRock's going to introduce. Well, first of all, BlackRock can't introduce it. They aren't an investment bank. They don't actually create securities. They are an aggregator. They're a giant aggregator. Matt Levine called them the aggregator of preferences. That's what the market effectively is, and BlackRock owns the whole market. What I
I was going
don't,
to add that if you want a good cynical point of view on all of this stuff, check out Matt Levine's
yeah, he's like the
column on
best.
this.
He's just
Yeah.
the best. If you from the perspective of this letter, right?
Hmm.
My takeaways were it is a crescendo on one side. It is a crescendo of the environmental movement in finance. It is the cloud cover that people need to actually start looking at environmental issues as real financial issues in their portfolios. Because when the biggest player does it, everyone else is given license to do it effectively. But number two, he codified what we've been saying here on Business Pants. No one knows what the fuck they're trying to achieve with ESG. Like they really don't. There's so many definitions, and we're all so confused about what is sustainable, what isn't sustainable, that he codified that idea by punting to disclosure and frameworks and basically saying we need more disclosure in order to effectively do that. They will release they'll release product around it. They're going to integrate ESG risk considerations, but there will be a continual battle about what the E, the S, and the G have to do with one another, what it actually is. You know, is a company good or bad? Is it a moral standpoint? Is it not moral? All of those things will continue to be battled until someone says, here's the measure, which is what we're trying to do here, which is what our stakeholder conversation is about here. But the world kind of needs to, agree that here's the 1 or 5 metrics that sustainability is.
Here are my 3 points. Ready? First of all, hello, Finland, because I love Finland. Second, absolutely. Glass Lewis, Sustainalytics, MSCI, whoever, maybe a new company, CG Lytics. Get in front of this. Like have a team that just innovates. Try to innovate standards. Come up with the standards. Promote them. Like work on them.
Don't outsource it. I'm doing it.
Hire people like consult, like Matt Moscardi.
Exactly.
Like get on this crap. Third, I leave you with a great quote from our beloved Greta. This is how old is Greta? She's like 15. How old is Greta?
Gretz? She's like 14, 15, 16, something like that.
This is a 14-year-old young lady. This is what she says, and it's perfect. It's a perfect quote. The biggest danger is not inaction. The real danger is when politicians and CEOs are making it look like real action is happening, when in fact almost nothing is being done apart from clever accounting and creative PR. So that's it's perfect for this discussion about the Business Roundtable, Fink Rock. Really,
it sounds like a rock band.
Don't just join. And as I said yesterday, it reminds me a little bit of Walmart suddenly deciding it's going to sell like free range organic almond milk popsicles or whatever. Like just because soccer moms are looking to buy it, it's not enough. I don't know. This ultimately it's a business decision.
Let's do Matt Makes now, because I get a little bit deeper into BlackRock itself. All right.
Keep moving forward.
All right. So what I made today is shorter and sweeter. If you listen to this show, you know I'm anything but succinct. But what I attempted to do was actually outline some muscle. What exactly is BlackRock's muscle here? Because BlackRock says in its Q&A, this is why I bring it up, right? Like they actually in their FAQ on the letter, they say, what does sustainability mean in the investment context? And they basically say that sustainability means incorporating environmental, social governance factors into decision making. So they said, to translate that for anybody who doesn't know what any of that means, they said sustainability means using sustainability to make decisions.
Right.
So it's sort of meaningless. So to understand actually what they
are meaningless,
what they're capable of doing, I actually wanted to get into a case study of what they've done. BlackRock owns effectively 17% of the U.S. market, where they are a dominant shareholder. And by dominant, I mean the single largest shareholder in a company. So almost 1/5 of all U.S. companies, BlackRock is the dominant shareholder.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot.
Incredible. Yeah.
That's a big number. Vanguard's up there too. I mean, like between the three of them, between Vanguard, BlackRock, and like Fidelity, you are talking about basically 2/3 of the market where they're the dominant shareholders.
Where's Free Float Media in that?
Free Float Media owns negative percentage of the U.S. market currently.
Okay. Got to work on that.
of that, just at a high level, okay, and I asked a friend of a friend for some MSCI data on this.
Ooh.
I have friends. 15% of the companies where BlackRock is the dominant shareholder, where they're the biggest shareholder, they rank in the bottom quarter of environmental performers globally. So effectively, 15% of companies that BlackRock has the most muscle, they are the largest shareholder, are the worst environmental performers in the world, not the US, the world, relative to their industries.
Well, I will add that BlackRock itself is not committed to disclosing its own climate risk across its own portfolios.
That's correct. So
Yeah.
so here is where BlackRock can have the most leverage. So if you're asking where would you like this letter is lovely, but where does the rubber hit the road? What would you expect to happen? This is where you should be able to see an immediate impact because BlackRock has the most muscle at these companies that like they're a dominant shareholder and they're poor environmental performers. Okay. So this is an idea that Professor Rick Marshall, our ex-colleague, came up with called beta engagement. I don't know if it's just Rick Marshall's, but I put his face up there saying beta engagement as a visual because I like Rick Marshall. Beta engagement is the idea that you can change an entire market because you're such a big player by voting on one issue, by muscling one issue across the board. An example of this is investors in the US used to not be allowed to elect their own board members. They had to wait for management to put up a board member to elect them. But these massive pension funds all banded together and decided, we don't like that. On every single proxy right now, we're going to put on the ballot to be allowed to vote for our own directors. And the US went from something like 6% of companies allowed that to 70% of companies allowed that in the span of like 3 years. Because they effectively, the pension fund said, we want to change the entire market practice. That is what BlackRock can do with environmental issues if it really wanted to. We're talking about a huge swath of companies where it is the muscle by itself. It can do that. Okay. So I pulled some of the companies that actually make the most sense to target. Most of the companies are going to be small and mid-cap energy companies. One in particular is the case study I want to do, a company called Bonanza Creek Energy. Now, Bonanza Creek Energy actually went through Chapter 11. They filed for bankruptcy a few years ago because they got hit by the drop in oil prices, and they're a small player, and they've reemerged, and it's gone well, and they are a natural gas fracker is what they are. They frack. Okay. And if you don't know what fracking is, it's effectively, what's the best way to describe it? Blowing shit up underground to get some dirty oil, right? Like it's the things humans do are unbelievable. Now, BlackRock owns Bonanza Creek Energy in a number of its funds, but in its total USA index, it owns Bonanza Creek Energy. Last year, BlackRock actually voted to withhold. Now, withhold is like not voting against. It's like, we're not going to vote. It's supposed to signal your displeasure with management without actually being aggro about it. BlackRock owns almost 14% of Bonanza Creek's shares, making them a massive player for Bonanza Creek. They withheld votes from 3 of their board members, the entire nominating committee.
Do we know why?
So they don't say why, right? But you would think, oh, well, this is good news. They are muscling a company with poor environmental performance because Bonanza Creek ranks in the bottom of environmental performers globally, and they're muscling them. But and then you see headlines like the one I found in their local news: 7 oil and gas companies were sued for violating the Clean Air Act in Weld County. Weld County is where Bonanza Creek operates, and they were one of the companies sued. But then when you look at BlackRock's votes, what you actually find is they voted for all the rest of the directors.
Right.
So why? This is kind of a prime example to me of where BlackRock can show its muscle. I looked up every one of these directors. And
Mm-hmm.
of them, and I'm gonna play us out here. Of them, almost all of them either work in energy or in finance. And the energy company people, like they've come from Anadarko, they've come from Encana, which is a massive oil sands company in Canada that's had tremendous amount of environmental issues and pressure put on them. These are not board members from like tree hugging society or renewable energy companies. These are board members who have a track record of environmental issues as executives or board members at other companies. So BlackRock votes to withhold votes for the nominating committee. Maybe that's a step in the right direction, maybe it's not. But this is where you'll see the muscle. If you want to know whether whether Larry Fink is true about this letter, you'll see it in the way they vote at companies like this. And this is where people like us should start asking questions.
Yeah, and someone needs to keep track of all this. And I will say, I just looked up Bonanza Creek. Here's a possible reason why BlackRock voted against them. I don't know their voting policies, but here are the names of the board members. Ready? Paul, Brian, Tom, Jack, Scott, Jeff, Eric. So it's possible that BlackRock has a voting policy where that if you have 0 women on the board, that they hold the nomination committee responsible for that nonsense.
Well, I will also say that Paul, who you mentioned, who they withheld a vote for, is on, I'm not kidding you, 9 other boards.
Oh. All right, well, maybe there's some women on those boards. Maybe he can make some friends.
No, let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Anyway, all right,
Relax
thanks, Matt.
Yourself. This was Business Pants. I am Matt Moscardi. That over there, that direction, is Damian Rollis.
Tomorrow's Biz Nuggets.
Tomorrow is our big bag of Biz Nuggets, our most fun show of the week.
Huge bag.
We got a massive bag this week. It sounds dirty when I say it that way. Thanks to our team here, the 2 Courtneys, Dan Ragat Schnig.
Anything can sound dirty.
Todd Hovenick and the Asset Clowns provided us music, and the wonderful John Walsh gave us our art. Please subscribe, rate us, tell us what you think, tell us how you feel, give us a hug. We need all your support, all the support we can get. This was ESG Wednesday. We will see you tomorrow.
Yeah, and if you're friends with Larry Fink, tell him about the show.
Yeah, Larry, come on. We'll talk to you later.
Bye, Finland.